As we look ahead at the future, I found this to be the most challenging part of this presentation for this audience. You guys are all about trying to explore the future. And so I thought about it in the way that I always tend to think about it, is that the evolution of networks is a fascinating study of human development and of the development of distribution networks and how they've evolved over the years from the earliest days of hooking your ox cart up to your oxen and using a network that was well understood by the people that participate in it to go to the marketplace and to trade and to barter. Well, then the Silk Roads of China and the spice roads of India and the Peloponnesian shipping lanes and the Roman roads and the ships that crossed the ocean and the clipper ships that did it faster and rail, and ultimately to today, where these distribution networks have assets like ours in it, global freighters, the new 777s that we're launching with almost 7,000 miles of range capability to connect endpoints of the world that are extraordinary, direct from Guangzhou and the Pearl River Delta to Memphis to the rest of the world, direct from Guangzhou to Charles de Gaulle and into all reaches of the world. I mean, we serve about 95% of the world's GDP, and we're getting to the point where almost anything can make it somewhere overnight now through these distribution networks. The evolution of networks, though, has repeated itself in a lot of different ways with a lot of different applications. When you look at the electrical network and you kind of imagine, the earliest days of this network, it was an extraordinary revolution, but it was based on some pretty fundamental applications. It was based on the electric motor, which was changing the industrialization. I mean, it was steam motors that were powering industry at the time had such incredible latency and loss. All of a sudden you had these electrical motors that could do things. You also had the electric light bulb. And, it was changing the way people lived and worked, and that network propagated itself extremely rapidly based on those two fundamental applications, the light bulb and the motor. And so the network was, was all the rage. It was controversial, it was exciting, and people really coveted it. But today it's almost hard to imagine the world without not just those fundamental applications that got delivered, but the derivative applications that no one could have imagined. I mean, people weren't even imagining tubes, much less transistors, much less integrated circuits, much less the things that we utilize today, that combine the applications of those fundamental capabilities that propagated the network to where we are today with the electrical network. Telecommunications, same story. It kind of plays itself over and over again when you look at the evolution of networks. And the excitement of where we are today. I mean, I use my iPhone, all the time. And the cool thing, my wife also has an iPhone 4, and so anywhere I am that I have a Wi-Fi network and and a 3G network, I call my wife on her iPhone, and she, this morning, as a matter of fact, the kids had just gotten up. They were, getting ready for school. I was up early here on the West Coast because I always wake up early when I'm out here, and so I call her. She answers. We touch the FaceTime connection, and I'm able to chat with the kids. I mean, this is stuff that we didn't imagine just a few years ago, or maybe we did, but we thought it was part of the Jetsons or something. I mean, it wasn't, a part of how we expected to be living, so soon. But but it's incredibly cool. But you may be saying, well, yeah, what is the point of this? And my point is that the power of networks just continues to increase. The power of connection continues to increase. We all know that Metcalfe, brilliantly stated that, the power of networks increases exponentially with the number of endpoints. And that's absolutely true, but we've never seen networks exploding at the rate that they are today. And I can tell you that all of the networks that I mentioned, the distribution network, the electrification network, the telecommunications network, continue to expand on this globe at fast paces. Viable networks always expand. There are enormous numbers of unserved and underserved parts of the world that don't have access to these same fundamental networks that have changed the way we live and think about it. So the ability to extend these networks is absolutely extraordinary. And so when I look out at the world, I say, okay, what does that mean for the future? And I love looking at extremes. In an unconnected world with no distribution, with no telecommunications, with no electrification, we still to this day see crops rotting in the field 100 kilometers from the starving village. No connection, no ability to make these things work together like they should. So that's what the unconnected world looks like, and it's still out there. I mean, we're working hard, all of us, in the connected world, but the access to visibility and information and distribution systems are what changes things. It's the rising tide that lifts all boats. Access to distribution networks, access to electrification, access to telecommunications changes everything. So in a connected world, what does that look like? Well, my friends at Crossbow developed this device called the Eco device. And so, in a connected world, the Eco device is a mesh network capability that's out there that actually has the ability to monitor crops. It has the ability to monitor the readiness of crops through moisture monitoring, through a moat that they built that literally can signal you and tell you when it's time to harvest the devices. I mean, when it's time to harvest the crops. When is it time to get ready to harvest the crops? And so the connected world, when compared in its extremes to the unconnected world, unleashes so much potential. And that's where we are beginning to come through today. We're beginning to come to this point where, the network of things that's out there, these sensor networks and mesh networks that continue to push the edge of what's possible. They continue to push connectedness in this notion that viable networks always expand. The internet today is no longer about, kind of that light bulb application that turned us all on, which was the browser. And it launched, it propagated, it became a global phenomenon based on that application. But we're to the point now where it would be pretentious for us to think that we even really understand all the levels of derivative applications that can be built, that can be invented, that can be mashed up through a hyper-connected world. It's no longer about the browser. It's about sensors. It's about connections, and it's about applications that really change everything. These connections establish themselves in ways that we all understand. We all have a pretty good recognition of what a point-to-point capability enables us to do on the network. It changes the way we live. It changes the way we learn. It changes the way we educate our kids. It changes the way we make friends. I mean, it's the same old story of the internet changes everything, but what's happening out there is the explosion of these connections and the availability of services that are acquirable through these connections is what excites me the most. The service offerings that begin to show up at the endpoints and the ways that you can put them together, is like this spiral of capability that's just exploding, what we can do and how we can mash up things that become available to us through this, through this incredible set of connections that are out there. So, in the rather mundane ways that I tap into it for FedEx to launch services that allow you to print something when you're on the road, or to launch services, that allow businesses to connect. I mean, we have some incredible customers out here on the West Coast that use our web services capabilities that have an asset-light model, but they use web services to push things around the network. And StubHub was one of the great early examples of a web services user, because they used us. I mean, their business model was really based on the ability to make that physical connection at the end of the day, but they used our web services engines to push a shipment image out to someone who had a ticket and have it addressed to someone who wanted a ticket, and then fundamentally fulfilling that transaction on the backside. But the explosion of these things really are, in fact, what's becoming the cloud. The cloud of connectedness out there, and the way that these tools enable you to do things that have never been possible before, I continue to find exciting.